Ada, listen to me. Everything I told you was a lie. My name is not just Emeka the laborer, the man who fixes generators and sleeps in one rented room. I am Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, the glass tower you can see from your doorway on a clear morning, the one that catches the sun like a blade. That is mine. And 40 more like it, across this city, across this whole country. The car that just stopped outside your shop, the one your neighbors are crowding around and touching like it is a spaceship, that is mine too. I could buy this entire street before the soup on your fire finishes cooking. I am not poor, Ada. I never was. And all of it can be yours tonight if you will only say one word to me. Marry me.
And Adaeze Nwosu, Ada, everyone on that street called her, stood very still in the doorway of her small roadside buka, a wooden spoon in one hand and a plate of hot rice she had been carrying out to a customer in the other. And she looked at the man she had loved when she believed he owned nothing in this world but the worn shirt on his back. She looked at the keys glinting in his outstretched hand. She looked at the fear in his eyes, which was, she realized, the only fully honest thing he had ever shown her. And slowly, my people, she set down the plate, she set down the spoon, and she said the words that would follow that man down every marble hallway and through every empty golden room for the rest of his long and glittering life.
You did not come here to love me, Emeka. You came here to grade me. You put on rags, and you came down to where the poor people live. And you watched me, and you weighed me, the way a man inspects a goat at the market to decide whether she is worth his money. And the worst part, the part I cannot forgive, is that I did not know. I was sitting an examination I never agreed to sit. You let me fall in love with a lie, so that you could find out whether I was good enough to one day be trusted with the truth. Keep your towers. Keep your keys. I did not fail your test, Emeka. You failed mine.
And she walked past him, out of her own small shop, into the thin grey Lagos rain, leaving a billionaire standing alone among the simmering pots, holding out an entire fortune to the one woman in all the world who had just proven she was worth more than the whole of it. My people, come closer, sit down. Because this is a story that will make some of you angry, and some of you weep, and a few of you, the ones who have been loved for the wrong reasons, or who have loved someone too wounded to believe it was real, will feel it land somewhere very old and very tender. And before we can understand why a poor woman turned her back on more money than her entire street would see in 10 lifetimes, we must first go back. We must talk about a very rich man who was so poor, in the one way that actually matters, that he dressed himself as a beggar and went out looking for the only thing all his billions had never once been able to buy. Chukwuemeka Okonkwo was by every measure this world counts and respects a giant. He had not been born one. That is the first thing you must hold, because the whole tragedy grows out of it. He had come from almost nothing, a boy from a small place with a sharp mind and a hunger that frightened people, who had clawed and built and risked and climbed until his name meant money, and his money meant power, and his power meant that a whole city bent slightly toward him when he entered a room. Real estate, telecoms, ports. He owned pieces of things that ordinary people used every single day without ever knowing his name was buried underneath them, like the foundation of a house. And he was, my people, completely and profoundly alone, not lonely in the small way we all sometimes are, alone in a way that had grown a hard shell around it, because somewhere on that long climb, Emeka had learned a lesson that curdled inside him and never left, that money does not buy you love, it buys you a very convincing counterfeit of it, and then it robs you forever of the ability to tell the two apart. Women came to him beautiful and warm and certain, and he could never once be sure whether it was his face they smiled at or the towers behind him. Men called him brother and clasped his hand, and he could never once be sure whether they loved Emeka or loved the doors Emeka could open. Every embrace had a question mark hidden inside it. Every I love you arrived already stained with the suspicion. Love of what? There had been a woman once, long before the money, and here is the small, deep wound the whole giant grew around, so do not miss it. When he had nothing, he had loved a girl completely, and she had left him for a man with a car and a future, and she had said to him, not cruelly, just truthfully,
Emeka, love does not pay rent.
And years later, when his name was in the papers, that same woman had come back, warm as morning, as though the door had never closed, and something in him had gone very quiet and very cold, and he had understood, standing there, that the world would love him now exactly as much as he was worth, and not 1 naira more. He never forgot it. He built an empire on the fuel of it, and he began, slowly, so slowly he did not even notice he was doing it, to test people. Small tests, traps, a rumor of ruin dropped to see who scattered, a pretended trouble to see who stayed. He told himself he was only being wise. He was, in truth, teaching himself, year by year, to believe that no one could ever love the man if the man was separated from the money. If you have ever sat in a room full of people who loved what you could give them, and wondered, quietly, with a smile still on your face, whether a single one of them would remain if it all vanished by morning, then type "the mask" in the comments, because that particular loneliness is one of the coldest a human being can carry, and Emeka had been carrying it for 20 years, and it had frozen something in him that was about to be, at long and painful last, thawed. So he did a mad thing, a thing his accountants and his security chief and his old mother would all have called insane. He decided to disappear. Not forever, for a season. He would peel the giant off like a coat. He would go down, all the way down, into a part of Lagos his cars only ever passed through with the windows up, and he would become nobody, a poor man, a man with calloused hands and empty pockets and no name that opened any door at all, and there, stripped of every single thing that made people lie to him, he would find out, finally, cleanly, whether a woman could love the man when the man was all there was. He told exactly one person, Sunday, his driver of 15 years, the one human being on earth he half trusted, who begged him not to do it, and then, seeing his face, sighed and agreed to be the only thread connecting the beggar to the empire he had left behind. And so Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, worth more than some nations, rented a single room with a leaking roof in Ajagunle, put on the clothes of a poor man, roughened his soft hands with a week of real labor, and walked out into the crowded, roaring, striving life of the people he had spent his whole existence flying above. He took work where he could find it, carrying loads, fixing generators, whatever a strong man with no papers could get. And he waited, with the cynical, armored heart of a man who was quietly certain he would prove, once and for all, that love was a lie the poor told each other to survive. He had never in his life been more wrong about anything. Because on his 4th evening in that place, hungry, aching, his pride raw in a way 20 years of luxury had let him forget a body could ache, he followed the smell of pepper soup and frying plantain to a small buka at the corner, a few benches under a tin roof, a single fluorescent tube, a hand-painted sign, and a woman moving between the pots as though she were conducting an orchestra only she could hear. Adaeze Nwosu. Let me tell you who Ada was, my people, because this whole story turns on her, and the world she lived in had decided she was no one at all. She was a poor woman. She ran that little food stall from before the sun came up until long after it went down, and it fed her barely, and it fed one other soul in this world. Her nephew, Obi, a solemn, clever boy of 9, whom she was raising alone, because her younger sister, his mother, had died 2 years before, and Ada had not hesitated, not for 1 second, before taking the child as her own. She had no husband, she had no cushion, she had a set of pots, a good recipe her mother had left her, 2 strong hands, and a spine, my people, a straight and quiet spine that the hardness of her life had never once managed to bend. And she had a way about her. That is the thing the money could never have manufactured. Ada fed people. Not only those who paid, those too, of course, that was the business, but she fed the old madman who slept by the gutter every night a small plate, without comment, without performance, as though it was simply a fact of the universe that a hungry person in front of you gets fed. She carried a running book of small debts owed by people she knew could not pay, and she never once chased them, and everyone on that street knew that if you were truly down to nothing, Ada's fire was the last one in Ajagunle that would still cook you something and let you keep your dignity while you ate it. She was not soft. She would chase a cheat with a ladle and a mouth that could peel paint. But underneath the sharpness was a bottomless, unshowy decency, the kind that does not know it is being watched, because it would behave exactly the same if it were entirely alone. Emeka sat on her bench that first night with a few coins, real coins, all poor Emeka had, and not enough of them. He knew it as he counted them. And Ada watched this new, quiet, oddly spoken laborer count his little coins twice, and go still with the particular shame of a man realizing he cannot pay for the food already warm in front of him. And she did not embarrass him. She did not announce it. She simply set the plate down, full, and said,
"New here. Your money is no good tonight. First plate at my place is always free. Everybody knows that."
Which was not true, my people. It was not a rule. She invented it in that instant, so that a stranger could eat without breaking, and she turned back to her pots before he could argue, and left him there with hot food and his pride both intact, and she had no idea, none, that she had just fed one of the richest men in Africa, and had done it for free, for nothing, expecting nothing, because he had looked hungry and ashamed and human. Something cracked in Emeka that night, quietly. He did not understand it yet. He came back. Of course he came back. He told himself it was the cheapest hot food in the district, which was true and beside the point. He came back because at Ada's bench, for 1 hour a day, he was not a suspect. No one there wanted anything from him, because he visibly had nothing to give. And in that strange freedom, the freedom of the man with empty pockets, he began, for the first time in 2 decades, to simply talk to a woman, and be talked to, with no question mark hidden anywhere in it. And Ada, my people, without the faintest idea of what she was doing, began to fall in love with a poor generator repairman named Emeka. She loved his quietness, and the sharp mind she caught glinting under it. She loved that he listened, really listened, the way a man does who has spent a long time being lied to and has learned to weigh what is real. She loved how he was with Obi, how this rough laborer would sit with the boy over his homework in the evenings, patiently drawing sums in the dust, telling him,
"A sharp mind is a kind of wealth they can never take from you. Do you hear me? Guard it."
She did not know she was watching a billionaire teach her nephew the only lesson that had ever truly served him. She only saw a good man being kind to a fatherless child, and it undid her slowly, the way the true thing always does. Let me give you one evening from that bench, my people, so you understand exactly what Emeka was standing in front of, and exactly what he almost could not see. There came a night, early on, when the old habit stirred in him, the testing habit, the trap-setting habit, 20 years deep, and he could not help himself. He told Ada, watching her face like a hawk, that he had lost the little work he had, that his pocket was empty, that he could not pay for the plate in front of him, nor the small tab he already owed, and he waited, with the cold patience of a man who has watched 100 warm smiles turn to frost the instant the money stops. He was testing her, even her. And Ada wiped her hands on her wrapper and looked at him a moment, and then, instead of the frost he was braced for, she quietly wrapped a second portion in leaves and pressed it into his hands for the morning, and waved the tab away as though it were a fly, and said,
"A person is not a ledger, Emeka. I do not feed you because your pocket is full. I feed you because you are hungry, and you are here in front of me. And that is the whole of it."
And the giant sat there in the dark, with warm food he had not earned, and a shame that had nothing at all to do with poverty, because he understood in that moment that he had just tried to set a trap for the one person in 20 years who had never once given him a reason to. He had carried his sickness down into paradise with him, and he swore to himself that night that he would never test her again, a promise he kept, and yet the larger lie went on standing in the dark because he had not yet learned the thing this whole story was built to teach him, that the disguise itself was the biggest trap of all, and the one person it would finally spring on was him. And here is the terrible, beautiful trap the universe had sprung, on him, not on her. Emeka had come down into that place to run a test, to watch and weigh, and find out if he could be loved. And instead he was being loved, freely, before he had passed any test at all, before Ada knew there was anything to gain or lose, and it was dissolving the 20-year shell around his heart like salt in warm water. He had never in his life been chosen for nothing. He did not know a person could be. Every day at that little buka was quietly demolishing the coldest thing he believed about the world, and he could feel it happening, and it terrified him, and it made him happier than all his money ever had, which is exactly why he could not tell her the truth. Do you see the knot he had tied? At first he stayed silent because that was the plan. The test required the disguise. But soon, so soon, he stayed silent for a new and far more dangerous reason. He was afraid. He had found the impossible thing, the real thing, and he was terrified that the moment he said the word billionaire, it would die. That the honest light in Ada's eyes would go out and become the old, familiar, calculating warmth he had seen on 100 beautiful faces. He told himself he would tell her soon, tomorrow, after one more good evening. He let the lie stand not out of cruelty now, but out of a coward's tenderness. And my people, hear this, because it is the hinge of the whole tragedy. A lie told to protect something precious is still a lie, and it rots the very thing it is trying to protect, from the inside in the dark, where you cannot see it happening until the day it collapses. The days became weeks, the weeks became months. And poor Emeka was, by a distance, the happiest and most whole that the giant Chukwuemeka Okonkwo had been since he was a boy with nothing. He had a woman who loved him for himself, a child who ran to meet him, a street that greeted him by name, and calloused honest hands he was, to his own astonishment, proud of. He had accidentally built, in a slum, with a lie for a foundation, the exact life his billions had never been able to purchase. And a foundation of lies, my people, however lovingly it is laid, can only ever hold up the house for so long. The truth came, as it so often does, not gently but all at once on an ordinary afternoon. A car, one of his own company cars, sent by a nervous Sunday with urgent documents that genuinely could not wait, a crisis only Emeka's true signature could solve, pulled up on that narrow street. And a young executive stepped out in a suit that cost more than Ada's shop earned in a year, looked around at the squalor in open distaste, spotted the laborer he had been sent to find, and said loudly, with a small bow, in front of the whole street, in front of Ada, in front of Obi,
Chairman Okonkwo, sir, forgive the intrusion. The board needs your signature tonight or the Lekki deal collapses. The car is at your disposal, sir.
And the street went silent, and Ada, standing in her doorway with a plate in her hand, watched every person she knew turn to stare, first at the impossible suited man, then at the impossible bowing word, chairman, and then, slowly, all of them, at her poor generator repairman, who was standing very still with a look on his face she had never seen before and understood instantly and completely. The look of a man caught, the look of a lie ending, and that, my people, is where this story began tonight, with the keys held out in the rain, with the offer of a fortune, and with a woman setting down a plate and walking away from all of it. If you have ever loved someone with your whole open heart, and then discovered that the entire thing had been, without your knowledge or consent, a test you were being made to type "she walked" in the comments, because that is a specific and terrible wound, and I need you to understand exactly why Ada, a poor woman with a hungry boy to raise, walked away from enough money to end every hard thing in her life forever, because you might think her a fool. She was the wisest person in this entire story, and here is why. Ada was not walking away from money. Ada was walking away from a verdict. Understand the difference, because everything depends on it. When Emeka held out those keys, he believed, with the whole broken logic of his frozen heart, that he was giving her the greatest gift of her life. But Ada heard something underneath the gift that he could not hear because he had been deaf to it for 20 years. She heard, "I did not trust you." She heard, "I loved you conditionally, and the condition was a test, and I administered it in secret while you gave me everything for free." She heard, "The version of me that you fell in love with, the poor man, I was never willing to actually be him for you. I was slumming. I was visiting, and at any moment I could step back into the car and become a chairman again. And you could not, Ada. You can never step out of your life. This is not a costume for you." He had made a game of the poverty she survived. And worst of all, the deepest cut of all, he had proven, by the very act of disguising himself, that he did not believe he was lovable as he was. He had so little faith in his own worth that he had to trick her into revealing hers first, before he would risk showing his. And a person who cannot believe he is worth loving, my people, cannot truly receive love when it comes. He can only keep testing it, forever, one trap after another, because no amount of passing will ever fill a hole that deep.
If you had simply been a poor man,
Ada told him later, for there was a later, we will come to it,
I would have loved you until we were both old and counted myself rich. And if you had come to me as yourself, the chairman, on the very first day and said, Ada, I have everything and I trust no one. Will you help me learn to be trusted? I would have respected that because it would have been true. But you did neither. You chose the one road that was a lie from the first step to the last. You did not want to be loved, Emeka. You wanted to be certain. And love and certainty, my dear, cannot live in the same house. Because to love anyone at all is to risk being wrong about them. And you were not willing to take the one risk that love is actually made of.
Now here, my people, is the second turn of this story, and it is the one Emeka never saw coming because it did not come from Ada's anger. Ada took no revenge. She did not expose him, did not sell the story, did not send anyone to his gate. She simply went back to her pots and her boy and her hard, honest life, and closed the door of her heart quietly, without slamming it, which is somehow worse. No, the reckoning that came for Chukwuemeka Okonkwo came from inside himself, from the one place all his security could not guard, because he went back to the towers, he signed the Lekki papers, he stepped into the marble and the glass and the cool hum of everything money can build, and he discovered, my people, that it had all turned to ash. He had spent one season poor, and it had ruined wealth for him forever. Every smiling face in his boardroom now screamed the question he had gone to Ajagunle to escape. Love of what? Except now he knew. He had tasted the answer. He had held in his own 2 hands what it felt like to be chosen for nothing, and he could never again pretend the counterfeit was the real thing. He had gone looking for proof that love was a lie, and instead a poor food seller had shown him it was real, and then had walked away with it, and left him standing in the richest rooms in Africa, understanding at last that he was the poorest man he knew. That is the justice of it, my people. No court could have designed it. No enemy could have delivered it. He had built a test to find out if someone could love the man without the money, and he passed and failed his own test in the same instant. He found the love, and he lost it, not because it was false, but because his method of hunting for it was the very disease that made him unworthy of it. The disguise that was meant to reveal her heart had in the end only exposed his own, and what it exposed was a bankruptcy no fortune could clear, a man who could not, would not, trust, and a man who cannot trust cannot be loved, no matter how loudly the whole world cheers his name. If you have ever learned, the hard and expensive way, that the things which actually matter in this life can never be bought and can only ever be earned, type "earned, not bought" in the comments, because Emeka was about to learn it in the deepest chamber of his heart, and it was going to take him years, and it was going to remake him from the foundation up. And there is a deeper lesson buried under Emeka's ruin, my people, one worth carrying out of this story, even if you forget every name in it. A man who tests everyone was almost always, first, a man who was himself only ever loved on condition. Emeka trapped and weighed and tested the whole world because, somewhere far back, the world had taught him that he had to earn his welcome, that love came with a bill attached, that the girl would stay only for the car. Cruelty of the heart, my people, is rarely born cruel. It is almost always a wound doing to others what was first done to it. It does not excuse the wound, but it explains why the man who most needed to be loved for nothing was the very man least able to believe it was possible, and why the medicine, when it finally came, tasted so much like dying. Because Emeka did not, my people, do what a lesser man would have done. He did not lay siege to Ada with his money. He did not park cars outside her shop, or bury her in gifts, or send lawyers, or lean on her landlord. All the things a rich man reaches for when he is told no. He understood, in the long grey weeks after, that every one of those moves would only prove her right, that you cannot buy back trust with the very thing that broke it, and so he did the hardest thing a proud man can do: nothing. He left her alone, he honored her no, and then, quietly, out of her sight and expecting nothing back, he began to change, not to win her. He had given up any right to expect that, but because she had shown him the man he could have been, and he could no longer bear to be the other one, he came clean, publicly, to his own board, to the newspapers that had always flattered him. He let the strange story of the chairman who lived as a laborer be known, and he told it against himself, as a confession, not a legend. And then he turned his frozen fortune toward the one place that had thawed him, not with a spotlight. Ajagunle got new drains, and a health center, and a school where boys like
Obi
could sit for real, and the funds behind it were quiet and permanent, and asked for no name on any wall. He did not do it for
Ada.
to see. He did it because poor
Emeka
had eaten free at a stranger's fire on the night he had nothing, and the giant had finally understood what that plate of rice had actually been worth. Months passed, then more than a year.
Ada.
Saw the changes come to her street, the drains, the clinic, the school that took
Obi
in and lit that solemn, clever boy up like a lamp, and she was no fool. She knew the hand behind it, though that hand never once showed itself to claim a thing, and she watched, the way a careful woman watches, for the catch, for the day the kindness would turn out to be a purchase, the day a message would come saying, "See what I have done, now you owe me." It never came. Month after month it never came. The good was simply good, and asked nothing, and that, not the money, never the money, was the only language that could ever have reached her. Because a gift that demands nothing back, my people, is the one thing a man who tests everyone is congenitally unable to give, and the day
Emeka
became able to give it was the day he finally became a different man. He did not go to her. She came to him. That matters. Hold it. Nearly 2 years after the rain,
Ada Nwosu.
put on her good wrapper and walked into the gleaming lobby of a building she had only ever seen from a distance, and told the astonished staff that she would like to see the chairman, and gave her name as the woman who once gave him a free plate of rice. And when they brought her up, and the doors opened, and
Emeka
rose from behind his desk with his heart in his throat, she did not smile, not yet. She looked at him a long moment, the way she had once looked at a stranger counting coins, weighing not his wealth but his soul.
I have watched you for 2 years, Emeka, she said. I did not come because of the school, though I thank you for the school. I did not come because of the money. You know by now the money was never the door. I came because for 2 years you have given and asked for nothing, and stayed away when staying away was the respect I was owed. That is a man who has learned to trust. That is a man who can love a person and not a verdict. I did not come to be rescued. I came because I am, at last, no longer afraid that you will one day put on another costume. So, try again. But this time, you will begin with the truth, on the first day, with both hands open. And this time, we begin as equals. Or we do not begin at all.
And Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, my people, the giant who had tested the whole world and trusted no one, put his face in his hands and wept, not the tears of a man who has bought what he wanted, but the tears of a man who has finally, after a lifetime, been given the one thing that cannot be bought, and who knows exactly what it cost, and exactly why it is worth more than everything else he owns combined. They did not have a fairy tale, and I will not insult you with one. They had something harder and far better, a true thing, built slowly, in daylight, on level ground. She did not move into his tower and vanish into his world. She kept her fire and her people and her name, and he learned, the giant learned, to sit on a bench under a tin roof and be, for 1 hour a day, simply a man his woman loved.
O.B.
Grew up with a sharp-guarded mind and 2 people who would have walked through fire for him, and
Emeka.
who had spent 20 years certain that no one could love the man beneath the money, spent the rest of his life being quietly, thoroughly proven wrong, every single day, by a woman who had loved that man first, for free, when he was hungry and ashamed and had nothing at all to offer but himself. If this story reached somewhere real in you tonight, if you have ever worn a mask because you were afraid the true you was not enough to be loved, or loved someone so wounded they could not believe your love was real, then do not leave this family without joining it first. Subscribe now, so the next story finds you the very night it lands. And tell me, in the comments, what city, what country is this story reaching you in tonight? From Lagos to London, from Accra to Atlanta, from Nairobi to New York, from Ajagunle to Amsterdam. I want to see just how far this one has traveled. And do not go yet, because there is already another story waiting for you, right there on your screen. Another soul the world tried to weigh and price, another heart that had to teach a proud one what it is actually worth. Because here is the truth I want you to carry home with you tonight, longer than any name in this story. You cannot test your way into love. You cannot trap it or audition it or trick an honest heart into proving itself while you stand safely behind a disguise, because the disguise is your answer. The man or woman who must first put on a mask to find out if they are loved has already confessed, in the plainest language there is, that they do not believe they are worth loving as they are. And no fortune, and no test, and no amount of anyone passing it can ever fill a hole that was dug that deep by someone long ago. Real love is not an examination you set for another person and grade in secret. It is a truth you offer first, with both your hands open and empty, before you have any idea what it is going to cost you, and the willingness to risk being wrong about someone is not the weakness of love, my people. It is the whole of what love actually is. Until next time, my people, guard the sharp mind and the open hand, for they are the only 2 riches they can never take from you. Love people for who they are, and let yourself be loved the same way, without the mask, without the test, without the bill. And remember always that the richest man is not the one with the most towers. It is the one who can hold out his empty hands to another human being and say, "This is all I truly am," and trust that it is enough.